I'm nervous. Welcome, y'all. My name is Melissa Eiffel. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a priest of Oshun in the Lukumi spiritual tradition. And welcome. By the title of the video, I'm sure you can tell that I am going to be talking about my experience in an Ile, which is a spiritual home within the Lukumi community. And I want to preface this conversation by saying that if you're here for tea, you're here for gossip, you're here for negativity, you won't find it. It's my intention, though, to provide an offering to those who are seeking what I could not find when I was on my journey. Over the course of the past year, I've had conversations where I've talked with people about religious trauma, spiritual trauma in African spiritual systems. And I've had to answer a lot of questions because there's no one talking about it. Leaving an Ile is something that's incredibly taboo. It's something that's not spoken about because this is a closed spiritual system. There's not much discussion around what that path might look like. And I'm certainly not going to share anything that's taboo. And also the people who I watch videos talking about their experiences with their spiritual godparent, or I've heard conversations, there was still a lot of disdain. There was still a lot of negativity. There was still a lot of hurt. And so when I was on my journey, that didn't resonate with me because that's not how I felt about my godmother at the time. It still isn't actually how I feel about her or the experience that I had, even though I chose to leave. And so what I want to provide is an offering to those people who are in a situation where you feel love, in a situation where you feel like you made the right choice for you, but you've come to a crossroads and you're trying to decide what's the next best step for you. And I want to, hopefully, my intention is to offer a conversation about, speaking my truth, speaking my experience, but maybe even what that could look like in terms of making that decision from a place of love, and maybe even some points of reflection in terms of how you got to where you are as I've gone through the journey over the course of the past year. And I'm sure I'll continue to go on the journey of discovering how I came to be where I was and the healing that continues to be required of me as I move forward. Some housekeeping issues. Excuse me. My intention is to do an unedited video because this is scary for me. I have realized over the course of this past year, this month in February, I realized how much hurt, and I'm still holding in my heart how much grief I'm still holding in my heart, how much I have left gone unsaid. And so speaking about my experience, speaking about my truth when I'm in situations with people that I love or have loved where I have felt harmed or disappointed or that I'm grieving is not something that I normally allow myself to do. And so this is breaking a pattern for me. This is an act of self-love for me, but I'm not going to be editing the video because I think that it's going to create a situation for me where I'm going to not want to share it. And I believe that this is meant to be shared. So that's one. So in that, if there's a cough, if there's a misstep, if I got to pause and take a sip, you're going to get that. Okay, so I don't know how long this is going to be. I have some guiding questions that I wrote down and that have been asked of me over the years, and some things that I want to help people with and walk people through. So start and stop as you need to. Listen as you walk around your house or whatever you're doing. But thank you for joining me. My apologies for the sound. My apologies for whatever, but we doing it raw. We're doing it raw and we're doing it straightforward. Okay, so I'm making this video today, and my intention is to post it today. It's February 28th, 2025, because today, and actually pretty much exactly to the hour and minutes, is the day that I had the conversation with my previous godmother around leaving my then spiritual home. And I have been, when I reflect on this year, I've been on a journey of self-discovery, really looking at how I got here, looking at my role in the breakdown of the relationship and my need to leave. And what does it mean for me to love myself and to choose myself? And my body's been grieving the whole time in ways that were known and unknown. And so speaking is about me giving myself the opportunity to express and to move up and out of me that grieving, and to give the love that's still there a place to go, and a place to go with integrity and with wholeness. And so that's why I'm making this video today, because it feels like a full scope closure and a necessary piece of my process. Ooh. So how did I feel on the day I left my Ile compared to how I feel now? I'll go back to even when I knew that I needed to leave, when I received spiritual confirmation that it was time for me to leave. I could not function, right? Like, speaking those words to myself and to others, hearing those words, it felt like my heart was being ripped out of my chest. I did not think that I was going to survive. I really did think that I was going to die. Like, not even die a spiritual death, but die a physical death, right? I thought that the stress of it, the hurt of it, the heartbreak of it would kill me. And I thought that, you know, the spiritual protection that I had garnered and the goodwill that I had garnered from God and spirit and my ancestors would be removed. Because how dare I, right? How dare I make this decision solely based on what is, like, what I felt like was best for me. And while I won't go into the details of the circumstances of me making that decision, I had come to a point where even what had occurred, I wasn't in a place where I could even try to have repair, And so that was even harder, because I'm a talker. We could fix this. We're not bad people. We're good people. It doesn't have to be this difficult. And I was in a place where I didn't have the energy, the capacity, or the desire for that. I was really, really, really exhausted. And so that was disappointing for me. It wasn't, I'm strictly disappointed in, you know, her. It was also, I'm disappointed in me, because I have an internal story and a value around loyalty. I have an internal story and a value around what it means to care for people who I love, even beyond caring for myself. And I will say that choosing to leave and asking to leave without knowing if the other person was okay, without knowing all the behind the scenes things of it, was the hardest thing for me. And over the course of the year, it's been the hardest thing for me, because I've been intentional about not asking for information, and actually rejecting information as it's come to me. And so yeah, now I'm in a space of freedom. I'm in a space of peace. I'm in a space of learning to live with the grief. I'm in a space of recognizing that it may never not be here. But that's what happens when you love, and that love has no place to go. You grieve, right? It sits with you. And so it gets lighter and lighter, and it gets better and better. I'm in a place that I never thought I would be in, spiritually and emotionally. But yeah, huge difference from now to then. So choosing my spiritual family, how did I find my Ile, and what drew me to it? So I found my Ile like we find most things these days on the internet. I was a new follower to someone who does a really good job of, you know, decolonizing Christianity on the internet. I'm somebody who, I say I'm a child of the diaspora, you know, raised in New York City, but born in the Caribbean and raised in the church family. I used to, you know, co-teach Sunday school, for God's sake, at one point. And so for me, I had always kind of been on the journey of wanting more, knowing that there was more than Christianity. And so decolonizing Christianity, I think it was 2018 or 2019, was a huge focus of mine. I was a new follower to a page, and that person had posted, the person who would become my spiritual godmother, and talked about the education that she provided for a community that she was leading. And I was like, I want to learn, you know, and I was I trust my own intuition. I always have. And I went to her website and her Instagram page, and I asked myself the question: Is this person? Right? Is this person? Is this a person who's meant to teach me and guide me? I didn't really know what that meant, but I asked myself that question, and my whole body said yes. My whole body said yes, and I was like, okay, slow up. Reached out, asked for some support, some services, some readings, and received those. And over the course of getting to know her, what drew me to the environment, what drew me to her was freedom, was a sense of freedom. I had grown up in a context where to worship God and to be a person that was spiritual meant that you had to be pious, meant that you had to dress a certain way, couldn't listen to certain music, couldn't do certain things, right? Couldn't drink, couldn't curse, couldn't even dance. I grew up in a very strict religious context, and um, you know, witnessing people love God, really love God in a free way, be their full self. And I remember one of the first classes I took when I learned, right, the 16 laws of E5, one of the laws being joy is your birthright. I cried because Christianity, in the way that I had always learned it, felt super oppressive and it didn't feel joyful. And I wanted some of that, real, just 100%. And I wanted some of that. And I didn't know that there were other ways to achieve it. And so what drew me to the environment was a sense of freedom, was a sense of wanting and needing community to learn in, to not feel alone in, to experience God in this new way in. And I found that. I'm not going to even say I felt like I found that, but I found that. And so that's what drew me to the community. I didn't know what to look for, right? You know, like, how do you know what to look for? How do you know, now I know what to look for, and I'll probably make some videos about that in the future. But back then I didn't know what to look for, right? One of the blessings of being in an African spiritual system is that it's a closed practice. Not everyone has access, and not everybody should have access, right? There are certain things that we hold dear and we hold close to us. And us is not just priests, but also practitioners. But to teach and to learn is done in the context of being a member, being a practitioner, right? There's only but so much you have access to as a client. And I believe that it was my path. I believe that you know, Spirit had been waiting on me. It's something that's been affirmed over and over and over again. And I believe that my godmother at the time was the person to support me in going through that. But I didn't know what to look for in a spiritual community. I had no idea what it should look like, what it should feel like, right? And here's where I start to kind of talk a little bit about my work. What I've learned over the course of the past year and remembered is one of my own trauma wounds before entering into this spiritual space was abandonment and rejection, right? Wanting to be chosen, wanting to be cared for, wanting to be accepted, wanting to feel like I belong. And so the idea of a group of people who come together to care for you and to support you, who you can also care for and support, and someone who is the leader of that, I shouldn't even put leader because that's what a godparent is the leader of a spiritual house, was something that like really resonated with me. It was something that felt good to me. It was something that felt like, ooh, I'm home. I get to have this. And then there was also this assumption that because it wasn't Christianity, that it was going to be everything that I wanted. There was an assumption of ease and love and light, and you know, this can't be right. This can't have oppressive factors. It's an African tradition, and I negated that we as human beings we oppress ourselves. Right? We can embody colonial and patriarchal and hurtful and harmful ways of being just by being ourselves, and that can be perpetuated in any environment. And so I didn't even know what to look for. I just wanted to be accepted and didn't even know that that was a wound that was still very prevalent for me. And so I chose just assuming that everything would be okay without giving insight into what I really needed and paying attention to certain red flags that showed up very early on in my connection with the community. Let me see. What are some of the most beautiful or affirming moments I experienced? Okay. Ooh. I think being able to help other people is one. But I'll even go back because this was beautiful for me. It was being seen. When you receive a reading and a spirit comes down and sees you and affirms you and acknowledges you and acknowledges how much you're loved and how hard you try and all the ways you've been harmed and gives you remedies for that. That is affirming, because many of us go our whole lives and we don't feel seen and we don't know how to trust people, right? I genuinely did feel loved. I genuinely did feel cared for, and I felt cared for by God. And learning all the ways in which God loves me, and learning all the ways in which I really am a good person, right? Having that affirmed was so important for me at the time. It just really made the space feel beautiful. I also did feel a sense of sisterhood. There were times when I needed things. There were times when my daughter needed things, and people came through. Being able to share my whole self. One thing about spiritual practices that are rooted in spirit, right? Like, meaning that people have intuitive gifts, they know about you, there's divination done that can read your whole life, you sit in misas, is you have to share your whole self, no matter how difficult that becomes, because it's going to be talked about, right? And so there were things I had not ever shared with other people that I held a lot of shame about. And through the process of engaging with the spirituality and being in community, I had to share, and not just share with somebody who wasn't going to see me again, and not just share with one person, but share with multiple people and share over and over again and affirm it and stand in it. And that helped me to learn myself differently. It actually is a part of what helped me make the decision to leave as well. And so that is one of the most beautiful things. Also, my initiation process was beautiful. My daughter was initiated through that same spiritual family. Beautiful. And the sense of community in that, watching people come together and make sacrifices to make sure that you get what you need, is a beautiful and affirming thing for you, for your humanity, but also for your spirit, The greatest thing I gained from being in the Elay, I would say, is, excuse me, I'm sorry. The greatest thing I gained from being in the Elay is being a part of a system where I got to learn myself, being introduced to this spiritual practice, seeing the different ways it can function, seeing not just the goodness in me, but the flaws in me, and being able to be well engaged with that. And so that's something that I learned by being. That's something that I gained, excuse me, from being a part of the Elay. So what made me leave? When did I start to feel that something wasn't aligned for me? Okay, what made me feel, when did I start to feel like something wasn't aligned for me? Truthfully, I felt that there was something out of alignment very early. I would say probably my first group meeting. In the beginning of my time, we would have meetings where we would do education, learn different things about the tradition and being a spiritualist. And some things happened very early on that challenged my perspective and how and how much I had grown in terms of my emotional growth and showing up in the world. And as a person, my personality is I'm gonna ask a question. I'm gonna say how I feel. I'm gonna stand 10 toes down in how I feel, and let's talk about it, right? Anybody who's worked a job with me knows like that is how I had to gain freedom for myself, right? That is how my healing came out of a space from my trauma growing up. And um, after I first, I'm gonna bring this a little closer. After I first, maybe it needs to go. Sorry, I'm trying to fix this. Um, after I first, um, after that first meeting, I spoke my mind. I spoke my mind in the meeting. I shared what didn't feel good to me. And the reaction that I received after that gave me pause. And it made me feel like, oh, maybe the things that I've been told about me asking too many questions or me being oppositional or me being difficult are true. Maybe I'm not supposed to be like this. Maybe this is a flaw in my character, you know? And I was like, okay, I have some growth to do. When I reflect on that, no. It's healthy to be in spaces where people ask questions. It's healthy to be in spaces where people even disagree and challenge you. And the way that I reacted to someone having their reaction says something about me. It says something about the trauma that I had grown up with. It says something about what I still had not worked through in terms of people in positions of authority. And I needed to use anger a lot to get my point across and to be stern and to hold my boundaries. And I couldn't use anger, right? And so because I couldn't use anger, I shut up. And no, I wasn't wrong in the position I was holding at the time. And it was okay for me to speak my mind. And when I reflect, I wish it could have been in a way where I could have spoke my mind and heard, and we could have had dialogue, as opposed to feeling as though I had no choice but to go along with what someone else wanted. And that experience early on set me on a trajectory of feeling like, oh, this is the way it's supposed to be. In this spiritual community, it's in this spirituality, there is no open conversation. In this spirituality, you don't ask questions. In this spirituality, there is no discussion. And that's cultural. And anything beyond that is European and whitewashed and American. Now, what I will say is, as an early practitioner, there's so much that you don't know, and there's so much that you don't have access to that you won't be able to know, right? But when it comes to your own feelings, when it comes to your own mind, your own thoughts, it is healthy to have healthy conversation and you have to know yourself. And for some people, they are absolutely fine being in a space where they don't where they don't have to have discussion. They're great being in a space of following along with direction only and not asking any questions. That doesn't work so well for me. And in that moment, all of my stuff kind of converged, and it made me feel like, oh, okay, I should stay, or I'm here because I need to unlearn this thing that everybody has been telling me is wrong about me, as opposed to having someone who could be like, okay, there's nothing wrong with asking questions. We don't agree, but let's have this conversation. That would have been a different kind of teaching and a different kind of support for me in my growth, right? So I knew very early on that there was something out of alignment, but because of my own stuff, I suppressed that for me, and I made it like there's something wrong with me, so I need to change, and I need to small up myself and quiet myself in this space. There are a series of questions here next, and it's like, what were key moments or events that made me realize I needed to leave? Did I wrestle with doubts or fears before making the decision? And how did I actually leave? Was it sudden or a gradual process? So I'll say this. I was in my spiritual community for 3 years. 4 years. 4 years, right? I'm not going to talk about specifics, key moments. I'm just going to talk about, as I've reflected over the course of the year, some themes that helped me to understand that it was time for me to leave. I already talked about not feeling like I could openly communicate. That changed over time. Over time, I developed a pretty close relationship with the woman who was my spiritual godmother. We were able to have a lot of fun together, social fun together, spiritual fun together. I like to think I was a confidant of hers, and she was certainly a confidant of mine. And I really thought that we could be friends in addition to her being my godmother. I think, that was a fallacy for a few reasons. I think some of the key moments and key themes of situations was feeling like I couldn't be fully honest, or else there would be retribution and harm. Feeling as though there needed to be a lot of group think, meaning everyone needed to think the same. And if everyone didn't think the same, the person that didn't think the same was the problem. And not only would they be a problem, other people would treat you as such. You could be ostracized and isolated and alienated. When I began to betray myself, there were some things about my own personal values and my own personal way of operating in the world that I started to shift. And I noticed that, and I would question myself, and I would feel like, no, this is just me needing to grow. This is what spiritual growth looks like, and I think what was a huge red flag for me, to my flaw, I think this is a flaw of mine, have a value of loyalty, right? Like, if I say I'm riding for you, I'm riding for you. But I can't ride for you more than I ride for me, right? And so what would happen, what I started doing, and I'm not saying anybody asked this of me, this is my reflection of me, is there were things that would happen and I would not be able to say, I don't agree. Or I would not be able to say, I'm not going along with that. I would go along because I had my own fears about being rejected, ostracized, put out of the spiritual community, or forced out of the spiritual community, right? I found that I feel like I was operating in a way that was outside of integrity for me. And once I began to really notice that, and I entered into therapy for myself, there was a point when my spiritual godmother at the time was the primary person walking me through my spiritual journey. my spiritual and emotional wellness journey, and that was very helpful. But then there became another time where I needed to um, seek additional guidance, and so I got another therapist, and I got a therapist. Excuse me, I got a therapist. And as I began to unpack and honestly speak to her about some of the things I was experiencing, I discovered how honest, how true I wasn't being to myself, and how lonely I felt in community, how much I didn't trust the people around me to really take care of me, right? Like, of me. Like, if I speak up and say how I feel and do what I think is best, I don't trust people to do that for me. And I was in the position of doing that for others. People would come to me and talk to me and say things to me, and I would support them in having those difficult conversations. I would support them in thinking through things with a new perspective. I would support them and encourage them to not speak negatively. And I really had nobody I can honestly go to. And I became aware that some people were comfortable in what, to me, and I'm gonna say to me because I don't know that this is actually dysfunction. I know that it felt dysfunctional to me. People were actually comfortable with having grievances and not speaking them, and being very fearful and not trusting each other, and having emotional breaches and tears and not repairing them, and talking negatively about each other. And it came to a point where it felt like chaos to me. And I, once again, this is me, not anybody else, I found myself wanting to fix all that. And when it wasn't my business to fix, right? And not only wasn't my business to fix, but it wasn't my business to fix because this is not my community to lead or to facilitate, right? And so that should have been a sign for me that I was being traumatized, because that's a role that I played in my family of origin. It's like, let's all be happy, let's be fixer. And I found myself in that same role, right? And so some things transpired, and it became clear to me that I was in a space where I was more prepared to go to bat for other people than I was prepared to go to bat for myself. And also that I was prepared to go to bat for other people more than they were prepared to go to bat for me. And, when I think about it now, I'm still hurt. I'm human. I'm still hurt. But there wasn't reciprocity. Things were out of timing. Things were misaligned. And there was a lot of scuttle, a lot of, I felt like there was some stuff happening. I felt like there was some conversations happening behind my back. I felt like there was some things going on. And, I was told, no, everything's okay. No, no, no. And it was revealed to me that everything was not okay. There was, in fact, some conversations being held behind my back, and negativity being talked about me. And I finally decided that no more. That it was time for me to care for me more than I cared for other people. And that waiting for it to be different or for it to get better, trying to convince myself that there's something wrong with me, not that I'm perfect or that maybe I didn't cause some harm too, but waiting for it to get better was hurting me, in fact, and that I needed to leave. The process of leaving was not an easy one. I will say, I received spiritual confirmation that I needed to leave a month before I actually had the conversation. And, you know, I've watched people be in transactional relationships. I've watched people be in situations where they were in a spiritual family with a godparent where they didn't particularly care for, but they needed things done. And so they would go, they would smile, they would do, and I just never wanted that to be me. I never want to smile in someone's face and feel hurt by you or feel some type of way. I feel like I can't trust you or pay for services and I'm wondering, you know, what's going to come up, you know, how chaotic will it be because of the energy between us. And so the thing that I wanted to do was to leave, and to leave with as much integrity as possible and with as much love as possible. And so I asked for a meeting. At that point in time, we were having monthly meetings already. And I asked for a meeting, and I said I wanted to leave, that I could no longer do it. There were no questions asked, and I don't think the questions needed to be asked. And I was, you know, granted permission to leave. What has it been like? I was granted permission to leave. There are specific ceremonies that you need to undergo to leave. Some of those were done. Some of those were not able to be done for whatever reason. I don't know. But I have been separated from that community and out of that community for, I consider today to make a year, because today is the day that I asked to leave. As far as I'm concerned, that was the severing of the godmother-goddaughter relationship. What has the past year been like? So the past year has been hard, quite frankly. You know, there were some relationships I had that were associated with my previous godmother. Some of those were god sibling relationships, and others of those were social community relationships, and very few of those relationships sustain, if any, really. And that was hurtful for me. I'm not even gonna hold you. Some people made promises like, oh, I would never, but the truth is I had already been there with other people who had left the community and previously, and I knew what my experience was and how hard it was to stay in connection for a lot of reasons. And so while I didn't necessarily know that it could be, I was hopeful because, you know, we had shared a lot. And so so leaving wasn't just grieving my relationship with, you know, the woman who had birthed me into this tradition. It was also the people who witnessed it, the people who were there, the people who you helped support, the people who supported my daughter. Those relationships have been severed for the most part for her too. And that has been difficult. That has been heartbreaking for both of us. And we've had to go on the journey of like talking through it and recovering from it and unpacking our own grief and our own losses in life and figuring out what that means for us. A lot of people ask me, am I still a practitioner? Am I still a priest? Do I still practice Lukumi? Absolutely. Have I had to relearn what that means in solitude? Absolutely. This spiritual tradition is not a spiritual tradition that is one that is it's not like a church where you can walk into any church and just start worshiping, right? You have to be welcomed, and you have to find the right environment that's for you. You know, safety is paramount. Emotional safety is paramount for me at this stage of the game. And so I'm grateful for the support that I have. I do have spiritual support. I have spiritual guidance. I have spiritual teaching and that I receive, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm also grateful to continue to expand that, right? Whether someone else will be a godparent to me again, I don't know, right? Only my ancestor spirits, God knows that. The Orisha know that. But my connection to spirit has grown. Have I been infallible? No. But I have had to learn how to learn and how to practice in a way that feels aligned for me and my ancestors and that feels whole to me energetically. And it has been beautiful and it's growing. The majority of the time, though, I have allowed myself to grieve. When you're connected to spirit through one person and all of your tools and elements come from that person or that community, you have reminders all around you about what no longer is. What do you do with those things, right? What do you do with what you've learned? What do you do if you've learned something and it's different than like what you're now learning? Like, where do you make space for that? How do you learn to trust yourself again? When your old wounds become your new wounds or your current wounds because you're going through the same thing, what do? And you sit in it. You reflect in it. You see what you were meant to learn through it. You give honor and grace for it. You honor yourself. You care for yourself through it. You cry. You hold your heart. You clean your, you clean your elements. You pray. I spent most of my time doing that and in functional freeze for a good part of 2024 as I allowed myself to heal. Would someone say, I've been asked before, like, do I hold resentment? And do I say that this is religious trauma? And do I say, I do label it religious trauma, but only from the, not but only, but, sorry, I label it religious trauma from the perspective of it was a traumatic experience that happened in the context of religion and spirituality. What we forget is that the people that we worship with and who we choose to guide us and lead us are humans. They're not infallible. They're not God. They're not the Orisha, right? They may embody spirit. We may have, as a priest, I may have gone through the rites of passage of having spirit connected to me, but I'm not Oshun. I'm not Oshun. And any spiritual guide that you have is not the end all and be all of you. And what was told to me is this journey is between me and my ancestors, right? Then the Orisha. And God is in all that. And not the human. And what we do because of our own pain and the stories that we hold is we bind ourselves to humans. And we tell ourselves that we can't leave them. We tell ourselves that they can't hurt us, that they will hurt us and that we won't be protected. Functioning with the highest level of integrity that's possible for me is what keeps me clean. Being the best person I can be is what keeps me clean. I don't tolerate disrespectful conversations about anybody, hurtful conversations about anybody. I don't even speak my experience plainly to people because people take that energy and make it theirs, right? Meaning that it's affirming to them. Your experience is your experience. You have the right to your experience. You have the right to speak your experience. And you have a role in that experience too. I chose my spiritual community. I chose my spiritual godmother. The things I did and accepted and went along with out of my own, what I know now is pain and stories, the things that were out of alignment to me that I did because I felt like I was being obedient, and that being obedience is like the highest form of honor. It's not. Not when it goes against yourself, not when it goes against yourself. And I did that. It was asked of me, but I chose it. I chose it. And so, you know, is it spiritual and religious trauma? Absolutely. But it's human to human, and it can happen anywhere. And so, the feelings that I have about my previous spiritual community, and maybe you heard it over me talking, and I certainly heard it over me talking, is mixed. It's both love and longing. So I guess that's grieving, right? Still grief. But I don't think that they're bad people. I don't think that they're evil people. I think that they're human beings operating in a spiritual tradition, trying to do what they think is best. And it's out of alignment for me. I do think that there are some people who I've witnessed be in spiritual community, whether that one or being any community really, where it's transactional. And what I will say is this: if you are in a spiritual space where you feel like you don't particularly care for the person who's leading you or guiding you, where you have negative thoughts and negative beliefs and perceptions, and you are not working to resolve those, but you are simply engaging in transaction and then speaking negatively about them behind their back, you are out of line. You are out of line. You are out of line. Because you are out of integrity with yourself, and you are out of spiritual alignment. And so figure out what getting in alignment looks like for you. For me, I chose to leave when I felt like that's what I would become. And I really encourage you to rethink that, because this spiritual tradition is not that. It's not going into a building, giving an offering, going home. You are connected to people energetically. You are asking things of your ancestors and theirs. And it's inappropriate to be doing so without a full heart of love and honesty with them. So, yeah. So let me see. Let me see what else I have here. Thank you so much for bearing with me. I know this might be a little bit all over the place. It's not a polished YouTube video. So thank you. Getting phone calls here. Okay. What is the hardest part about leaving? The impact on my spiritual practice? How have I grown? I think I've answered that, but really choose yourself. You will, in this tradition, especially if you aren't a practitioner, you will need spiritual guidance, but it'll come for you, right? And you can take your time finding spiritual guidance and teaching again if you're deciding to leave. I've learned a lot over the past year. Some of it has been through formal teaching, spiritual support and services, and then also like spiritual downloads and connection, and then affirming that with the spiritual teachers that I've been connected to. And so, yeah, it does impact your spiritual walk, and you will develop a new way of walking and being. Okay, so if you're considering leaving your Ile, really sit down with yourself and have an internal conversation. If you are deciding to stay only because of what it looks like to other people, because you're afraid of being hurt and harmed, because you believe that something bad's going to happen to you if you choose to leave, then you're going to have to build up your own spiritual fortitude and your own understanding of your personal relationship with your ancestors, the Orisha, your spirit guides, and God. Because that, to me, that says that your connection is only through another person, and that is making the other person God versus you having your relationship with the omnipresent, omniscient God that is in everything and with everything. And so in doing that work, you're going to be reflective over who you are and what you need and gather up your spiritual support. I would say if you aren't currently in therapy, get a therapist. I know as practitioners, we're not able to discuss in detail a lot with our therapists, or our therapists don't understand. And so if you can find a therapist that is a practitioner or a priest, that will give you more leeway to have conversations, receive feedback and support, or at least a therapist that talks to spirit. So one of the things about my therapist that I absolutely love is she talks to spirit. So she's not a practitioner. She actually identifies as being Christian. But from our first session, spirit was like, oh no, her name is now Melissa. Her name is Onisoyi, which is my priest name. And she was like, I can't call you Melissa. What's your other name? And this was before we even began talking about my spirituality. So find you somebody who talks to spirit too, right? Like your only spiritual connection outside of yourself. It can be dangerous if those only connections are, through your spiritual family, because then, how do you affirm and confirm, right? How do you worship? How do you engage outside of that environment? So yeah, find you people who you could talk to have a real conversation and get some real support. That was really helpful to me, is to begin to have conversations with people who are in other ELAs, and to realize that it didn't have to be the way that my ELA ran, didn't have to be the way that it is, that there are other ways, and also it's going to give you access to what is your inner truth, and then to also other spiritual support that you may leave should you decide to leave. I know some godparents find that taboo, but I just don't think that your only access should be your godparent at all. They should know to a certain extent what you're doing, but having that much control over your life, I think that that's unhealthy. I think that's it for me. If there's one thing that I hope that you take from my story, is that you have the right to your full scope experience. That leaving an ELA, while it's not common, it is certainly not taboo. A lot of people do it. Many people do not talk about it. People don't receive support in it, and that you don't have to be in a place of I hate you to leave. You don't have to be in a place of you're this horrible person to leave. I think that that's very dangerous, and that it's mixed. You have the right to the full breadth and depth of your emotional experience. And so if you're someone who's considering leaving and you need some support, I'm here. That's not the intention of the video, but if you need a clinical, as a therapist, or I'm also a wellness coach, or a spiritualist consultation around that, I'm here to have that open, honest conversation. It's something I've been doing over the course of the year with people, having real conversations about what's going on and supporting them, and having difficult conversations with their godparents when necessary, or leaving if they feel like they need to when necessary. But seek and receive support, and you'll be okay. You'll be okay. Life will look different. It will hurt. It will be hard, especially if you had emotional connections, but you will be okay. Your greatest protection is living with integrity and functioning with integrity. And as long as you're doing that, you will be okay. Your greatest protection is living with integrity and functioning with integrity. And As long as you do that, oh, as long as you do that, you'll be okay. So I hope this was helpful. Thank you for bearing with the non-well produced YouTube video. If you need anything from me, drop it below. I'll probably wind up doing more videos. I just don't think that I'm the kind of person that's going to be doing a well-produced video. I'm going to come speak to you honestly and from the heart. My name is Melissa Eiffel, licensed clinical social worker, wellness coach, and Eolosha, priest of Oshun. Thank you so much for your time. And if you need me, my contact information will be below. But I wish you well. I wish you love. I wish you light. And I hope that this was supportive. Peace.